Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Steve Johnson, Senior Director of IT Enterprise Imaging with Tampa General Hospital, and Matthew Butler, Director of IT and Clinical Ancillary Systems, also with Tampa General. I'm Anthony Guerra, Founder and Editor-in-Chief. Steve and Matt, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Anthony.
All right,
Hey,
great,
thanks for
Steve.
having us.
Awesome, thank you. Steve, let's start with you. You want to tell me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Sure. We work for Tampa General Hospital. Um, we are a academic medical health system located in Florida. We are currently in expansion mode, and Matt and I's roles are over enterprise imaging for the health system. So anything that relates to IT reports up to us, and our scope is radiology, imaging, enterprise imaging. So anything that has imaging in it touches our scope.
Very good, Matt. A little bit about your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty similar to Steve. We are somewhat of a pair, if you will. Steve and I have worked together for a long time. Basically Steve pretty much summed it up, but yeah, so one thing he missed on was inpatient, outpatient, whatever it is imaging wise, that's really our realm. We are traditional IT guys, at our core, your typical server stuff, things like that. We have backgrounds in that. We came up doing all those kinds of things, supporting those things. But, as the industry has grown and progressed and acquisitions and things like that, you now see things like enterprise imaging teams. That's really where we slot in. And I basically, one day I might be helping figure out a PAC system. The next we might be doing, new integrations or new acquisitions, things like that. So although our scope has narrowed to focus more on enterprise imaging, it's still varied, right? Day to day, what we handle is still very vast and wide. So.
All right, very good. Steve, the evolution of your position, because it's kind of interesting the way the structure and the evolution of your role. Just give us a little bit overview, a little more on that.
Yeah, sure. We've had a partnership with Tampa General for many years. In 2022, Tampa General assumed 100% ownership of what was Tower Radiology Centers. When I started, we were 3 imaging centers in Tampa. We served the greater population in Tampa, Florida, which was kind of the Tri-County area, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco. And we grew the outpatient ambulatory market from 3 centers to 21 centers in a short time. And I was previously the Chief Information Officer for Tower Radiology Centers. And in 22, Tampa General came in and, through alignment and, leadership structure, it was important to have one, leadership chain and report up through the main hospital. So Matt and I were both promoted to, heads of enterprise imaging. So I became Senior Director of IT for Enterprise Imaging Arm. I sit in a group of senior leaders within IT, and we take care of all of the IT components for the hospital, both inpatient and outpatient.
Steve, do you report to the CIO at Tampa General Hospital?
Yeah, so I report up to the CIO through a VP. His name is Dennis Dansby. He's currently VP of Informatics and Technology, which includes enterprise imaging, lab, and other specialties within IT.
All right, great. So let's talk a little bit about what you're up to today. Maybe some of the main things that you're trying to accomplish today and how they're going.
Sure. Yeah, I think, as you can imagine, we serve a broad population throughout Florida. We have locations on the East Coast of Florida, on the West Coast of Florida. We have over 155 ambulatory sites, 21 outpatient radiology centers, a myriad of, partners and networks. We're affiliated with the University of South Florida as well from our academic medical institution standpoint. And, as you can imagine, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of acquisition, and through that, Matt and I get to help integrate, turn on, and bring things kind of to the next evolution of the technology space. And a lot of times that means that we're dealing with disparate systems, systems that are either antiquated, which we take and modernize and get to the proper levels. But there's kind of two components of it. One is our Epic systems reach that we use to reach broader markets, and we've really laid that down as the foundation of our EHR. And then Matt and I, come in on the back end, and we work with different PACS systems. And that's one of our biggest challenges now is we have multiple systems that spread across, our footprint. And, as you can imagine, the systems don't always talk very well together. So we have, that's kind of our responsibility that rolls up to us. And that's kind of what we've been working on for the past few years, that we've been head of enterprise imaging.
So, and Matt, feel free to jump in wherever you want here. But so this is one of the core issues is disparate PACS systems, and oftentimes they're brought into the organization through acquisition. So you acquire a center, you acquire some organizations, acquire hospitals, and you get a whole bunch or some new PACS systems. And it's the issue of we want clinicians to be able to see images that were taken anywhere in the health system without logging into a whole bunch of different places. Take me through that a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, so what you're describing is one patient record, right? For an organization now. In our industry right now, you're seeing a lot of consolidating. It's been that trend for quite a while, right? Some of the mom and pop imaging centers, reimbursements, things like that have come into play, and a lot of those folks, find it tough to, exist in the market. So there's a lot of consolidation. Well, as you can imagine, exactly, to your point, you have all these disparate systems. Everybody wants one record and wants it now, which makes the most sense, right? For patient care, you want to have the most amount of information available in one place, right? And available to everybody. Well, unfortunately, PACS data or DICOM data, as it's referred to, is very large, generally speaking. It's very large files. Sometimes there's video, things like that. So migrations for organizations that have been, operating for a decade or more can literally take years even, sometimes, depending on the complexity of the data. So that is our number one main objective, aside from, keeping the lights on and your typical improvements and vetting out new solutions, is that one patient record. We're interested in, any tools out there in the industry. We've looked at, we go to the different seminars and things like that and try to stay on top of the industry and then implement said tools for one patient record. It also spills outside of just PACS, right? Because it's imaging. So it could be cardiology. Even when you're talking the patient record itself, things like EMPI engines can come into play, data conversions, so that's really sort of I think what a lot of folks are starting to come to terms with. I don't know if you remember, Anthony, about 10 or so years ago, there was this big push to deconstruct PACS everywhere. Mm-hmm. Whereas instead of just buying one vendor, having your archive view or everything built in, there was this push to be as agnostic, brand agnostic as you can. And it was great at the time. The goal was to better share information with folks and to be vendor neutral. But now we're kind of dealing with the opposite of that, with all the consolidation and everything. People just want it in one place and they want one application, right? So it's a very interesting spot that we see all these organizations, ourselves included.
Is this similar to the dynamic on the EHR side where, um, you know, people were saying, all right, let's do best of breed because we want to give our clinic, this is years ago, we want to give the clinicians the absolute best tool that they want. And then everybody realized, oh, that's a freaking nightmare on the back end. Right? So forget about that best of breed. Let's go best of suite. Let's go with Epic. Epic took over the industry basically because they had what people really wanted. At least the IT people, because there was one system, you didn't have to worry about the integration on the back end. So from at least, I guess you could, for one part of this conversation, you could talk about PACS, and I know it's much bigger than that. But from a PACS point of view, are you saying that we're moving away from a, oh, you know, whatever system you have is great, to a, we have to settle as an organization. We should settle on one PACS, and then we want to sort of standardize on that. So then there has to be migrations. If we do an acquisition that has a different vendor, we want to, because that's what they're doing with Epic, right? If you're an Epic health system and you acquire a hospital, they're coming off of whatever EHR they have and they're going on to Epic. Is that same dynamic going to happen on the PAC side or not? Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of back up to what you said though, because about settling, I don't necessarily agree with that terminology. I don't feel as though that we would settle on anything. We actually do a great bit of work on vetting out the different solutions, you know, proof of concepts, things like that. Also, you know, Steve and I's background being in imaging as long as we have, you know, we have the privilege and we're fortunate enough to have seen all of pretty much every vendor, most vendors, I would say, in the wild and how they operate. So we have a pretty good idea of what we want, what we don't want. So I wouldn't use the term settle by any means. In fact, we're looking to pick the best of breed to be our enterprise PAC solution. So our other groups and organizations out there, so I don't know if they would consider it settling. What you would actually look at is more, what is the largest platform they already have, or maybe what's the most beneficial deal that they have with a particular vendor. You'll see them then elect that platform to be their enterprise solution. But you'll also have a lot of groups, large groups, just leaving what's in play a lot of times too, where they don't want to, maybe they don't have the skill set or the team, or maybe the funding, or maybe it's a short-term acquisition. There's a lot of that where they kind of just leave what's there. So that in my head would be what would be settling, but that's not something that TGH or TGH Imaging in general is looking to do. We are looking for that best of breed, and that's what we intend to implement. You know, that's sort of how I see it. I don't know, Steve.
Yeah, and Anthony, I'll give you a kind of a direct answer to your question, because I think one of the challenges that the industry faces, you know, this isn't just a Tampa General, you know, Tampa, Florida, you know, conversation. This is a very, you know, national, you know, worldwide issue. And, you know, the consolidation that we've seen across the market, not only from the radiology perspective, but cardiology and just health care in general, there's a lot of consolidation. And what happens is you have these leftover systems. And if you took a look at your stack, your information stack, your technology that you have, and you wanted to standardize on one system, you know, it becomes a very complex problem. It's, you know, oftentimes financially driven, because to get off of all of your helper systems and disparate systems, you know, there's a lot of dollars that kind of follow that to kind of migrate and standardize. So, you know, Epic provides the pathway on the front end for us, you know, and we are fully committed to that. That is something that you know, makes our job easier. But from a enterprise imaging standpoint, you know, we had a recent hospital acquisition, you know, not too long ago, and there's probably 10 pages worth of, systems that they had that, we're in the middle of, integrating, right? So every scenario is a little bit different, but, you could literally bankrupt an organization by trying to fix everything. So, the concept is to try to get to one PAC system or one main system, but is that technically or feasibly possible, or financially possible? I don't know. That's some of the challenges that I see on a national basis, that everybody's probably in that same scenario. And these migrations, if you were to do something like that, they take multiple years. The migrations alone, months, years. We've seen some pretty long migrations, and it depends on how, set you are. There's legal requirements for medical record retention. Those are all sorts of things. So as we're trying to do the best for our patients and move forward, to get, close knit, more standardized care, one single platform, there are some, very heavy challenges that we have that are facing not only us, but the industry as well.
Right, Steve. So it's not the same dynamic as on the EHR side because, like I said, I really do believe that it's almost standard if an Epic health system acquires another hospital that's not on
Mm.
Epic, they're going on Epic. From what you're saying, that is not the same dynamic we're going to see on the PAC side because the migrations are so much bigger or more onerous or expensive, correct?
Correct.
So you're going to have to live. We are going to have to live with a multiple PACS world. So you do everything you can to, and I'm putting words in your mouth, you can explain. You
Mhm.
do everything you can to mitigate or to make seamless the exchange of images or the ability to see images for a clinician in such a world where we're not all going to be on the same packs. So we're going to have multiple pack systems. So how do I make life easier for you, Mr. or Mrs. Clinician, because you don't want to log into three systems? And
Right.
right. And I also want to talk about, so touching on that, I also want to talk about the Epic PACS integration. So you have Epic is the one in the center, and you could have 3, 4, 5 PACS systems. Ideally, as we said, and someone else told me this in an interview I did the other day, absolutely all imaging roads should lead back to the EHR. And I think
Mhm.
Matthew touched on that before, right?
Yep.
Because that's where you want that clinician to have to go to. Now, I've also been told that sometimes the clinicians, that I'm not sure how good that integration is. I don't know if sometimes the clinicians want to see it in the native packs, the image, because they could see more of it or there's more context. I don't know how good that Epic Packs integration is. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking there. Steve, you can start and then Matt jump in.
Yeah, sure. I think the last comment that you made, I think it's as good as you make it. I think we've done a really good job to get the imaging into Epic, as as seamlessly as possible. I think that's one of the strong points of Epic is that you can get, that record or that image into Epic. And a lot of times, um, physicians, healthcare providers, they don't always need the full diagnostic capability of PACS. So it does give us a little bit of a safe space, where we can kind of, bridge the gap between, disparate systems, get everything talking to Epic, get all the images presented, and give you enough information and knowledge that you need to treat, diagnose, and, heal patients. That's probably, number one. There are some caveats to that. There's, certain specialties that do like full DICOM, presentation of images, for diagnostic and clinical interpretation, because they like to do their own, as well. So there's a world outside of radiology that, we have to be in tune to, as imaging experts, so we try to do the best job that we can to get what's needed at the time of service or, before, and then, there are some challenges that lie in, getting those thicker, like Matt was talking about earlier, heavier images, because we deal with images that have very large data sets, especially when you get into outside of radiology, we're starting to get into, digital pathology and endoscopy and, full motion video. And the machines that we work on, MRIs and CT scanners, they're getting bigger, faster, and they're generating more data, more metadata, more data within the images. There's post-processing and 3D work that we're doing as well, where those image sets become very, problematic, and it becomes a challenge. So you wouldn't necessarily get that in the Epic, presentation view where you have like your longitudinal record for patient, care. When a normal primary care, is viewing patient records, they really want to just look at the report and see what the, clinical indication is, right? They don't always need to look at the diagnostic full capability. They're kind of looking for the output, the result of what we do. So that's kind of a mini snapshot on that topic, Anthony.
Matt, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I just want to touch on that very last point a little bit further. Just so you have, well, first off, Epic integration, they utilize industry standard stuff, which is very nice. They're, when it comes to integrating PACS or imaging, they're using links and things like that in order to make them viewable. They actually allow you to launch whatever viewer you like. They do have their own. So I know you had mentioned, clinicians and viewers and things like that. So to that point, and to the last point Steve was making there, the majority of referring physicians or clinicians, they just want that report. But you do have surgeons, you have neurologists, things like that actually do want to see the images. And we do actually make sure that we're providing the best possible universal viewer is the term, or zero footprint viewer is the buzzword everybody uses now, as they're all web-based. But to be honest with you, a lot of those groups that want that advanced imaging, they want to see the actual imaging or maybe manipulate it as a radiologist would. A lot of times they're going to have their own PACS, believe it or not, or certainly their own viewer. And so we have to actually look at ways, to provide the DICOM information to them. The old industry standard is CD, and we're doing our very best. And I think the whole industry is to get away from CDs. I mean, most computers don't even come with CD-ROMs anymore. So, we're looking at these viewers to be able to provide access to the DICOM images, right, to folks that are within our care network, right, that have, maybe they're not necessarily a TGH clinician, but they, they have access to our instance of Epic and things like that, right? So we can make it available to them to download the raw DICOM and bring into their own pack so that they can feel comfortable and have the viewer they're looking for. So it's more like you're trying to please everyone, I guess. When it comes to it, it's not so much an Epic thing. It's actually more of a, how do you best serve, your customers? Like, what do they need? What are their wants and needs? So, yeah.
All right, very good. Let's talk about the relationship that needs to happen between IT folks like yourselves and the clinicians, the clinical folks that are overseeing imaging. Obviously, you guys have been doing this a long time. You probably know a lot, right? You've learned enough to be dangerous about the clinical side of things. But tell me your thoughts on how to have an ideal, productive relationship with the clinicians that are overseeing imaging. Steve?
Yeah, a lot of times, Anthony, we look, that kind of starts in the hiring process for our analysts and techs. But we do look for clinical backgrounds in our group. I think there's certain specialties that, if you don't have a clinical understanding of what you're doing, it's a little bit harder to, break through into the industry and be relevant, with the clinicians. So we do have, we have nurses, we have, technicians, a lot of our staff, have advanced degrees and certifications in those areas, where they've worked in a clinical setting for 10 years and, they might want to try their hand on the IT side because, they were an administrator or, support personnel within their group or department, and they had, PACS functionality or, skill sets. So we do have a lot of, trained professionals within IT that, are clinical by background training and, and by nature of the job that they're doing. So I do think that's really important to kind of set the stage. There's, being in healthcare, there's a lot of terminology and, things, being thrown out there, shortcuts and shorthand, just like any industry. So I think that's, number one, foundational, really important for our staff to have that training, and then we also put our staff through, training as well, with the vendor to, help understand. So there's the basics of, building blocks that you need to have. In addition to that, I think it's really important to have a good communication foundation. And sometimes that's set by the organization that you work for, and sometimes that's, personal preferences. But, anytime we go into a venture, we always have a physician champion. We always have some sort of clinical champion, and we partner really well with our operational team. So anytime we go into a venture or a project, we make sure that there's an IT person, IT component, and an operational component. And it doesn't always have to be a physician, but we partner up, one-to-one, kind of like a buddy system. IT is, kind of very central to the healthcare space, and anything that you do, it's eventually going to run into the IT road. So, I think those two things are key for me is, the training experience, foundational knowledge that you need to have, and then, the partnership levels that we do have as well. We often find ourselves rounding, in the physicians, areas where they're working, because we're providing that's, one-on-one support experience. So I think there's a mix of physical presence, in the post-COVID remote, tendencies that, this industry has now. I do think it's really important. We're on site, every single day. We have a physical presence in the office, and I think that's, not every organization's like that, based on size, but I do think that that's one thing that might set us apart, that the industry might, need to key in on, for future success.
Yeah, Matthew, Steve made a lot of great points that rounding, listening, you may have different committees and governance and these kind of things. This is a typical IT dynamic, is managing user requests, frustration. Why can't this particular thing that I want be done immediately? Usually some best practices we hear about are, again, what Steve talked about, being visible, listening, and also transparency about what you are working on, right? So understand what you want. Here's what we're doing. We're not doing nothing. We're doing all these things based on the priorities of the organization and the strategy of the organization. All this stuff has to dovetail. And, I guess explaining where your request lays in our priorities, right? It's maybe it'll happen someday, maybe it'll happen in 6 months, but right, because you got to manage user requests. Not all users are the same. Some users are very influential and very high powered, so to speak. And I don't know. Your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, that is definitely always the balance, right? How do we keep everybody happy? We'll take a clinical driven initiative, and maybe it's a year-long project or two, and we work in the background for a lot of that, right? Build and testing, and then somebody will bring another new initiative to you, and they've completely, maybe not forgotten, but take for granted what's kind of going on already with the previous initiative. So how do you slot that in? How do you create realistic timelines that serve your organization? Because part of it is it's very timely. Like, patients need results and want healthcare now, and they can't wait till next year. So if you're going to truly bring helpful solutions and things like that, it's obviously expected that it's done quickly, right? And that's always the struggle. So one of the things that we do is we meet regularly with ops and the rest of IT, and we sync up. We show our projects. We have a common project space with the rest of the IT in the organization. We're very much so tied at the hip to a lot of those folks, and we all do our best to make sure that we are making those deadlines. Now, that's always they use the term, like herding cats and things like that, or juggling, keep the plate spinning, all that stuff. I mean, it truly is that's our, as leaders, that's one of our biggest jobs, right? Is, you can be an SME, in your industry or a particular product or what have you, but that only gets the project started, right? You've got to balance that out with the rest of the organization, and namely clinical side of things, right? That's why we're here. It's a tough balance, and to Steve's point earlier, in IT, it's tough to find somebody that understands that. If you have somebody coming from maybe marketing or finance, they obviously have urgent needs, but nobody's going to have an unfortunate situation if you don't meet those needs, right? It might be a financial impact. Well, we have all that as well, right? But we also have that patient care thing. So it's definitely interesting. It's definitely a shock to folks that come from traditional IT and come over into healthcare. It's definitely a different dynamic.
Very good. Steve, an interview I did the other day around imaging was really interesting because the person I interviewed talked about how enterprise imaging is under the same pressures as any other entity in a health system around shrinking margins. Healthcare doesn't seem to be in the best place financially. Uh, and so they feel the pinch. They feel the pinch. They are given the same marching orders as everyone else, which is increase good dollars in and decrease bad dollars out. Around imaging, that can be scheduling type of things, moving people through faster, more studies, right? Production revenue. On the bad dollars out was around application rationalization, vendor consolidation, maybe some cloud storage stuff, and things like that. Do you feel the same the same drivers, meaning in addition to all the patient safety stuff and all the good stuff, there is that business stuff about let's increase the revenue, let's decrease the costs?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's something that we've been in tune to. I think specifically on the outpatient side, DRA, 2007, was a big, that Deficit Reduction Act. That was a big, um, event for us. And then I think also there's always going to be regulation. There's always going to be, new, standards, quality of care, things like that you have to comply with. And I think it's, overall better for the patient. But I do think that, for lack of better terms, enterprise imaging has been under attack, because if you look at where the spending goes, as the population ages, they become more consumer of imaging services, and imaging services are not traditionally the most friendly on the wallet. So, payers, there's a lot of, you know, inspection on what we do. And it feels like it's more so than ever. And to your point, there's a lot of, external factors, if you will, that prohibit or make our lives a little bit more, difficult, with the constraints that we have. So you mentioned it, cloud, you mentioned security earlier in our preamble. There's a lot of things that we have to be aware of from an enterprise imaging standpoint, but yeah, reimbursements are shrinking. There's a big push from, hospital-based services to outpatient services right now. And that's something that we're reacting to and kind of looking at, future forward, in our strategies to see, how do we decompress, inpatient and, not overload our outpatient, because it's based on throughput. You want to be as efficient as possible. That's one of the reasons why I think organizations, try to standardize and centralize on a EHR platform, that kind of does the meat of the work. But there's other challenges, those external factors that, keep pressing on, the reimbursements and fee schedules and, things like that. And that's something that, I think we've been able to react to and adapt to over the years, because of our size. But, it is unfortunate for some of the, smaller systems that don't have that ability to react, because you know, one change might upset the balance. So I do think that you have a good point there, Anthony. I think everybody's kind of in tune to that, but I do think that I don't want to say we're experts in it, but we've had a lot of practice over the years with reimbursements, challenges, those external factors that kind of move the needle. And it forces us to become more efficient as an organization, not only operationally, but from an IT standpoint as well.
Very good. What's the goal, Matt? Maybe I'll bring you in here. What's the goal as far as patients being able to access their images? You've got patient portals, right? Epic's got the patient portal. I suppose the perfect state would be an image. I'm a patient of your health system. An image taken anywhere in that health system is accessible to me through my Epic portal, and I can share that with whomever I want. I can send that image to whoever I'm about to see next, or share it with them in some fashion. Maybe diagnostic quality. I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. I don't know. But that's ideal, right? But is that far off? Is that a future goal?
We're already living in that realm, right? So I would say the gold standard is definitely Epic MyChart, right? Anywhere that is already on Epic, or even not, any referring clinician can gain access, to Epic as well. So exactly that, right? So you have the entirety of the patient record available to the patient via MyChart, web-based, super easy. They can literally make it available to their referring or not, right? If the provider is already a participant, in the Epic universe, they're, pretty much the link just has to be made between the patient and the provider, and the record's available. So that we're already living in that world, and that's something that Epic does a phenomenal job with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, outside of that, right, there's still a big market out there that maybe isn't interested in signing up for accounts, or maybe they are an Epic user, or maybe, whatever the hang up is. Like I mentioned before, maybe they have their own systems that they want to ingest and read from, or evaluate from, right? So we have other solutions like that as well already in place, and have for actually quite some time. Not to toot our own horn, but the truth is that this has been a thing for quite a while. And to your last point, cost reduction, and again, back to CDs. So the industry standard is unfortunately still handing a CD to a patient and saying, here you go, but it's quite costly. A lot of places try to pass that cost on to the patient, and things like that. So how do you get away from that? And this is how we stumbled into your exact ask many years ago. There are plenty of solutions out there that not only will control your CD burning robots, but it will also provide things like links that you can actually give to the patient. They can make an account, a one-time account. You can share it with them. The provider can share it with them. They can share it with their provider. And, it's pretty user-friendly. So if Epic's not going to work for a particular situation, or, we want to, like I said, we want to get away from physical media, things like that. We've had solutions like Sorna is a name that's out there. I don't want to, give credit to one. There's many great solutions out there, and we have a few. But yeah, that's the idea. It always has been, at least in the past decade or so, is how do we make this digitally and readily available to not just the patient, but also their providers easily. So definitely something we look at, and something that's integrated. And I would still say Epic is probably doing it the best in our organization currently.
Very good. Steve, what would you say would be what's the main thing right now, or the biggest thing that you can't do that you would like to do that would have the biggest benefit? Like, we can't get these images from over here over to here, but if we did, man, that would solve a lot of our problems. Like, what's that big nut you're trying to crack?
Yeah, I think there a while ago there was a concept of health information exchanges. If I had to pick on something, I think there's been some legislation recently that have kind of broken down some of the barriers. I think the Veterans Administration, had some, regulation that was enacted. There was some regulation on the, the rest of the market as well, as far as like sharing, information. But that's probably going to be one of the bigger challenges. In terms of magnitude, probably not the biggest challenge that systems are facing, but it is definitely a challenge, and it comes up almost every single day. So we've had to design, solutions, whether they're helper systems or, home built, homegrown solutions. We've had a lot of, really recent, good partnerships with a few companies that we think that are going to help, really kind of dominate that space and really open up, that gap that we have for exchanging, not just exchanging images, but exchanging health information. So I would kind of say, back in the day, there was, the concept of HIEs, it was kind of left upon the state, that kind of transformed, into, the regional health information systems. So I think that's kind of a challenge that I would say it kind of fights us every day. And if I wanted to put a light on something, I think that's something that we need to work on holistically as a group. I don't think that's something that no one's really solved that yet.
Hmm.
There are systems out there to share information, but and Epic's actually done a really good job with that from the EHR standpoint. They've kind of, paved the way for that and really kind of adopted a standard. But from an enterprise imaging standpoint, you've got a critical patient in, some rural, remote area, and, they have imaging or they, need imaging. And I think that's one of the challenges that we've always had as a industry is, trying to get that information to the clinician to make the, best decision possible and not have to re-image. I know we've solved that in certain spaces, but from a ubiquitous perspective, I still think that there's some challenges and some work that we need to do in that space.
Right. So without like putting a CD on a carrier pigeon, how do we get that
Mhm.
image study that was done in one place to where the patient currently is, where it's needed? Because you can't email the file. It was way
Right.
too big. So how do we get it over there? Um, that would be sort of a really nice thing to figure out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve. Please.
No, I was just gonna say we've done a lot of work with a company called Medicom. They have a decentralized health information network that they've adopted in that space. I think they've got some recent accolades. But there's others, there's LifeShare and PowerShare and Ambra. There's a few out there that do that, but now we're creating mirror copies of PAC systems or, XYZ vendor systems. So how do we get all that into one network, and kind of deconstruct the proprietariness of what vendors have developed? Because, information sharing on that side, that needs to change a little bit too. And I think that's going to be central to like taking next steps forward as an industry or as a system.
All right, very good. Well, we're about out of time, so I want to just get a final piece of advice. And the way I'll frame it up is, Matt, best piece of advice to someone in your position at a comparably sized health system, basically you at another place, maybe without all your experience. What's your best piece of advice to that person?
Since since disparate archives are sort of the hot topic, I'll go on that. So I would give the advice that find either a PACS or a VNA or even some powerful routing tools, something that your biggest struggle is linking all the disparate systems. So find something that inherently has something built into it, whether it's your PACS or it's a helper system. Find something that is going to allow you to morph data, move data, connect to many different systems, agnostic as can be. The problem is that a lot of these PACS or VNAs, they do lack a lot of the higher end functionality that some of these helper systems have, but you're starting to see them mixed into products like Metacom and that Steve mentioned a moment ago. So I would put less of an emphasis on your actual archive. And this, I don't mean this to sound negative by any means, but focus less on the radiologist. We've spent our entire, PACS world focusing first and foremost, rightfully so, on the radiologist, they're viewing, making sure they can view images. Well, we've got that pretty well handled now. Most PACS systems do it fairly well. So we need to take a step back and look at it from the back end and how do we better connect and how do we move things around. So I would put my emphasis on that to help with organizations and consolidation, truthfully.
Excellent. Steve, your best piece of advice to someone in your position at another health system?
Sure. I would say communicate, get out there, go to trade shows. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and reach out to a colleague, whether it's in a similar position or, in the same division or area that you're in. Because I think communication sharing, information about what we're doing, that's probably going to be key. I think if there's strength in numbers. I think if we get together and kind of vocalize, kind of like what we're doing here today, if we vocalized our issues, we can kind of stand firm and be together on, some of these united fronts. I think the other piece, and it probably wouldn't be for somebody that's working at a health system. It's probably more for the vendor relationship. I would say that the vendors, as a charge, they probably need to start working on more of a, connected, we had the concept of interoperability many years ago. It was thrown around like, AI has been in the last few years. I think the interoperability, like build interoperability into your products. I think that's going to be key for us to move forward and to really kind of get over some of these hurdles. Some vendors do that very well, and some vendors, are more focused on different areas of development within the organization. And I would say that there needs to be a reserved component on the vendor side to build in interoperability with the products. So that way it's always being worked on. It's always, there's always going to be, issues and incidents and things like that come up, whether it's through user groups and things like that. But I do think that from the vendor space, probably just to add like a little bit of a charge in there, I think we need to get a little bit better at the interoperability piece and focus a little bit on the outside of what not only you are doing, but what the industry is doing. So that way we can kind of get past some of the hurdles that we typically run into as IT professionals.
Excellent, Steve. Matt, thank you so much for your time today. I think people are going to really enjoy this. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony.